reacting to simple histories, the bullet that started World War One. Personally, I don't think it was the bullet which started it. I think that there was going to be a major war at some point, just that this was the trigger which kind of made it happen at that time of the century. Anyway, remember, like and subscribe, and let's get on with the video.
Gavrilo Princip and the assassination of Archduke Franz.
So you also have to remember the assassination would not have happened if it wasn't for the driver.
Ferdinand. On Sunday, June 28, 1914, Serbian nationalist Nedeljko Čebrinović threw a bomb at the back of a car carrying Archduke Franz Ferdinand.
Well, it wasn't just that. It was 7 people who tried to assassinate him in the end.
The bomb rolled off, wounded around 20 people behind the Archduke instead. Not the best start to an assassination that would lead to World War I. In 1914, Europe looked a little different from today. Most of the continent...
Well, you have to think, the Germans had an empire and you had the Austro-Hungarian Empire. Right. But it looked very similar to how it actually is today. You still had the major powers that we have today, but sizes of countries varied, and some countries didn't exist because they were part of empires. Now, you have to think that some of the most important countries in the world are in Europe, and some of the largest.
Was divided between 3 major powers, the German Empire, Russian Empire, and the Austro-Hungarian.
You could also argue with the Ottoman Empire and the UK that they also played a large role in European affairs.
Empire, with France, Italy, and a few other countries squashed in.
You also have to think that German Empire is wrong. They had a little bit more land.
It was that last one, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, and its strained relations with its southern neighbor, Serbia, that is key to understanding why the assassination occurred.
Serbia kind of gained independence only a few years earlier than the war starting.
Serbia had grown to detest Austria.
Do you struggle to drink enough water each and every day? Well, I'm about to introduce you to the cube that will not only enhance your...
Hungary after it occupied its neighbor called Bosnia-Herzegovina, first in 1878 and formally in 1908. Bosnia-Herzegovina contained a sizable Serb minority and was there.
Well, yeah, it's just like with Czechoslovakia with Aryan people during World War II.
For believed by Serbian nationalists that it ought to be part of their own country. Serbia overthrew their pro-Austro-Hungary rulers some years earlier in 1903 and had established a government that wasn't too fond of the empire.
Well, no. At the start of an independence, you don't tend to like the people who you're under. Look at the USA with Britain, for example. But relationships do tend to repair.
By 1914, these tensions only increased as Serb and Bosnian Serb nationalists stoked the flames of the slowly growing fire by creating militant organizations to obtain their territorial objectives.
The Black Hand.
And Franz Ferdinand's political desires, significant as he was next in line as the Emperor of Austria-Hungary, only fueled their anger.
But his wife couldn't be Empress because she was from a non-noble background.
Ferdinand was in favor of a more unified empire, where its Slavic citizens in southeastern Europe would get better political representation, while sounding great on paper to Serbian nationalists.
Well, yeah, so Archduke Ferdinand actually wanted more power to go to Serbia and so on, and in fact, if they had not killed Ferdinand, then there would have been a high chance that they would have had more power and more freedom in Austria-Hungary and also become an ally.
it would accomplish nothing but weakening their goals for a separate, larger Serbian nation, and so sought to prevent it. In May 1911, the Black Hand was formed, although back then it was better known as Unification or Death. It was a secret revolutionary organization whose name tied in with its ultimate goal, to break the southern provinces from the Austro-Hungarian.
And at this point, you know, most Serbian people wanted unification, but were not willing to fight for it because of the history, because of how powerful Austria-Hungary was seen to be.
Empire, and create an enlarged, supposedly ethnically united Kingdom of Serbia. Although not part of the Black Hand, young, poor Bosnian Serb Gavrilo Princip, who had been radicalized since his youth, shared their sentiments and had befriended other radicals determined to change the tide of history, later being introduced to the Young Bosnia group. Like many others, he believed Serbia had a moral duty to free Yugoslavia.
Yeah, well, the Yugoslavian state wanted to be part of Austria-Hungary, and the Serbian nationals just didn't understand that, which then created a sort of more verbal conflict, but it kind of just meant it just meant that there was going to be a dissolution of the empire somewhat soon.
Slavs still under Austro-Hungarian control. Princip was just 19 when he met other Bosnian Serbs like himself after traveling to and living in Belgrade. Some of these later co-conspirators were students, others were already revolutionary exiles because of their socialist beliefs. Over the last 10 years leading up to 1914, there had been multiple attempts on government officials' lives by other nationalists. The most notable of this was Bogdan Zarajic, who attempted to assassinate General Marijan Varashani, governor of Bosnia.
Well, yeah, but you also have to think a lot of assassinations can happen if you don't listen to your people. And this is what happens. But, as well, if they had waited just 10 more years, then they would have been in a much better situation. Because Franz Ferdinand actually wanted to listen to the Bosnians, and they also wanted, and he had a lot of power. It wasn't really constitutional monarchy at this time.
In Sarajevo in 1910. He shot 5 times in his direction before turning the gun on himself. This is one of the events that spurred on Princip and his co-conspirators just a few years later. In 1913, relations between Bosnia and the rest of the empire had reached an all-time low. A state of emergency was declared by General Oskar Peturek, leading to the dissolution of the Bosnian parliament.
It also put in restrictions for all Serbians who lived in the empire.
Position of martial law and the shutdown of Serbian cultural and educational societies. This, of course, only incited Princip's rage further, and he formed a group with 2 other friends.
And that's why I think if the emperor just tried to talk to the parliament of Bosnia, then World War I wouldn't have happened that soon. And probably may not have even happened.
Nedeljko Čebrinović and Trifko Grebesh, whose goal was to ultimately follow the earlier Zarajic's example, but with more successful results. They were not the only ones who had such designs. The Black Hand, who Princip was already friendly with, were already busy forming their own plans. In Sarajevo, a prominent member of the organization, Daniel Ilic, sent Čebrinović a note, a newspaper clipping regarding the Archduke's planned visit, and a single word in the margins, greetings. Čebrinović showed the paper to Princip, who had the same thought. This was their opportunity. This was not the...
And of course, it was in Sarajevo, which was a place where political unrest had happened, and so they thought that sending in the heir may help because of pride.
Young men's first encounter. Ilic and Princip were already friends, along with Jabrinovic and all members of the Young Bosnia Group, a revolutionary anti-Austro-Hungary group. Ilic would later claim he coordinated the attack completely, although in truth he had been less the puppeteer than the puppet.
Yeah.
From there, the three boys consulted Major Tankosic, a Serbian officer and one of the founders of the Black Hand, who agreed to provide the group with weapons to carry.
And of course, this was done by the army. The Black Hand was created by the army to crush Austria.
Out the attempt. They sent word to Ilic, who immediately organized things in Bosnia itself, arranging to send 3 other young revolutionaries.
Ugh. This is actually really good.
To meet the others in Sarajevo. Their names were Sajetko Popovic, Vaso Chubrlovic, and Mehmed Bastic. Armed with 6 bombs, 4 pistols, and a cyanide pill, each to be taken immediately after the assassination, the 7 young Bosnians began their attempt.
Well, yes, but you could also think that none of them actually took the cyanide.
It was June 28th, 1914. Archduke Franz Ferdinand and his wife, the Duchess Sophia, were to inspect a military garrison before traveling towards the city hall to open a new state museum. Daniel Ilic had positioned the assassins along their route, each young man armed with a bomb. But it turns out, killing is a lot easier in theory than in practice.
Well, yeah, he had tons of guards there with him, and it just meant that sneaking in was hard, but actually throwing a bomb onto the car was even harder. In fact, the car that they were in actually said armistice. It was 11/11/18. That was the number plate.
First, the motorcade went past Mehmed Bastic, who lost his nerve and failed to throw his bomb. The same happened next with Chubrlovic, who also failed to act when he saw the car coming. But the same cannot be said of Jabrinovic.
Oh, armistice. 11. 11/11/18.
When the car came down his part of the route, he summed up all the courage of a 19-year-old who had never seen war and threw his bomb, which promptly rolled off the back of the Archduke's car and under the wheels of the one behind in the motorcade, injuring around 20 people, but killing none. What followed was more like a Looney Tunes episode than real life. Jabrinovic immediately swallowed his cyanide pill before jumping in the river. Unfortunately, the pills were old and ineffective, so
I knew none of them died because of cyanide poisoning, so I thought none of them actually took it.
rather than kill the young student, all it did was make him vomit. And rather than the river washing him away, Jabrinovic found himself standing in 13 centimeters of water as the river had dried up in the heat, before being dragged out by police and beaten up, before being taken into custody. The rest vanished into the crowds and the confusion. Disheartened and angry, their attempt had failed. But unexpectedly for all of them, that wasn't the group's last chance at the Archduke. After hearing others had been injured by the bomb, Ferdinand changed his plans to visit the museum,
and went to the hospital, and the driver took an accidental right turn.
Instead, he wanted to travel to the hospital and check on the injured. But that message did not reach the Archduke's drivers, who continued with the original plan. Meanwhile, Gavrilo Princip was lamenting the group's failures at the nearby Moritz Schiller Cafe when a twist of fate changed the course of history.
When he shot Franz Ferdinand and his wife, he actually had a sandwich in his hand, apparently, according to people who saw it.
Almost directly in front of the young rebel, the car carrying the Archduke was told to stop, the driver being told of his error. When the car came to a stop and put into a slow reverse, Princip saw his chance. Summoning his courage, he pulled out the pistol Tankosic had given him, and at point-blank range, shot Archduke Franz Ferdinand in the neck and his wife Sophia in the abdomen.
You can actually see where Sophia was shot. There is some clothes in the museum that they were going to visit, and it is her clothes of where she was shot.
Immediately after, both were dead before they reached the hospital. In the aftermath, 25 persons were implicated in the assassination. Mehmet Bastić escaped to Serbia, but the others were not so lucky. Being over 20 years old, Jabrilovic, Ilić, and fellow conspirator Jovanovic were executed.
Yep.
And Princip, Jabrinovic, and Grebsha found themselves imprisoned at Theresienstadt.
And I think they all died before the end of the war.
All three would die in the next 4 years. Interviews with Princip, Jabrinovic, and Popovic during their trials showed that these three at least did
Princip died in 1916.
not regret their actions, but they also didn't anticipate what would come next. Just a month later, diplomacy and civility between Serbia and the Austro-Hungarian Empire had broken down completely. Serbia, with the knowledge of new support from the Russian Empire, still acquiesced to some of these demands by Austro-Hungary that included suppressing propaganda against the empire and allowing their officials to join the Serbian inquiry into the assassination.
Which I guess is completely fair, but there was also some impossible requests which meant the war was inevitable.
Without a complete agreement, Austro-Hungary responded by breaking diplomatic relations. The Serbian army mobilized, assured of Russian support behind it. Austria-Hungary too did not stand alone, however, having nurtured a pact of alliance with the German Empire. Seeking to assure their ally, Kaiser Wilhelm II and his administration issued the infamous blank check to the Austro-Hungarian government, promising uncompromised assistance in their endeavors in the Balkans. Emboldened by their ally, on July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war.
And that is how the war was started. And it was because of that Russia joined in. And because Russia joined in, France joined in. And then when France joined in, Germany invaded Belgium, Britain came in. And Montenegro just did what they wanted and came in anyway.
On Serbia, shelling the national capital of Belgrade that very night. What occurred in the days that followed was a near domino effect of hostility, as European powers and nations scrambled to honor pacts of friendship and alliance.
And Portugal, even after, I think it was 600 years. 600 years, honoured an alliance between Britain in 1916.
Europe, as historian Christopher Clark has written, sleepwalked into war, triggered in earnest by an angry 19-year-old boy, Gavrilo Princip.
Anyway, that's the end of the video. So remember to like and subscribe, and yeah, bye.